My parents skipped my big day for my brother. 6 months later, one photo blew up their lives for good. I was wearing a navy cap that wouldn't stay straight because my bobby pins were cheap. I had my diploma cover in one hand. My name had just been called. And the 3 seats I saved for my mom, my dad, and my brother were still empty. Have you ever smiled through the biggest moment of your life while your stomach was already dropping? Or realized, right there in public, exactly where you rank in your own family? Because that was me. My parents skipped my graduation to celebrate my younger brother like he'd just won the lottery. And for months, they acted like I was the cruel one for not getting over it. I'm Emily. I'm 23 years old and I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Before I tell you how this blew up, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I always read those because it's wild seeing where people are listening from. Now let's go back to 6 months ago, when it all started. If you had met my family back then, you probably would have said we looked normal. Not perfect. Not TV perfect. But normal. My dad worked long hours, came home tired, and still acted like paying the electric bill was a personality trait. My mom was the kind of woman who texted "call me" with no context and then got offended if you panicked. My younger brother Mason was funny, loud, good-looking in that irritating easy way, and somehow always the center of the room even when he had absolutely nothing going on. And then there was me. I was the dependable one. The one who got good grades without being asked. The one who remembered birthdays, picked up prescriptions, filled out forms, called insurance, and knew where the extra batteries were. If something needed doing, it somehow floated toward me. For years, I told myself that being the responsible kid wasn't favoritism. It was just life. Mason was more emotional. Mason was still figuring himself out. Mason was under a lot of pressure. Mason needed a little extra support. I heard those exact words so many times that I basically built my whole personality around not needing anything. That sounds sad when I say it out loud, but it didn't feel sad at the time. It felt efficient. Like, okay, he's a mess, I'm not. So of course they focus on him. That was the deal, and I accepted it way longer than I should have. To be fair, Mason wasn't some cartoon villain. He didn't spend his life plotting against me. He could actually be really fun. He'd make dumb jokes while I studied, steal fries off my plate, and act like every family dinner was open mic night. When we were kids, he used to stand outside my room and slide notes under the door if I was mad at him. Usually they said stuff like, "Sorry for existing" in ugly handwriting because he knew I'd laugh. So no, I didn't grow up thinking my brother was evil. I grew up thinking my parents were doing their best. That was the lie I told myself. By the time I was in my last year of college, I was tired in a way that lived in my bones. I was finishing my degree, working part-time at a coffee shop near campus, and doing an unpaid internship that somehow expected full-time energy for $0. My feet hurt all the time. My back hurt. My laptop fan sounded like it was begging for mercy. I had exactly 2 good bras left, and one of them had a bent underwire. But I was about to graduate. And I'm not going to pretend that didn't matter. Nobody in my immediate family had finished a 4-year degree. My parents liked to mention that when other people were around. "Emily's our academic one," my mom would say, like I was a museum exhibit she occasionally dusted off. So I really thought graduation was going to be different. I thought this would be the one day where nobody could minimize it. I thought there would be no way to make it about Mason. I know. I know. That's on me. The first sign that something was off came about 3 weeks before graduation. My university sent out the ticket portal, and I got 6 guest tickets. I immediately texted my family the screenshot like a little kid handing over a gold star. My mom replied with, "Do people really sit through the whole thing?" That was it. Not, "I'm proud of you." Not, "Can't wait." Just, "Do people really sit through the whole thing?" I laughed it off and sent back, "Yes, LOL, that's kind of the point." She reacted with a thumbs up. My dad asked about parking before he asked what time my name would be called. Mason asked if there would be real food after or just tiny graduation chicken. Again, I laughed. Then my mom asked if the ceremony would be live streamed. Then she asked if names were alphabetical or random. Then my dad asked if they could just come for the last part. Then my mom said, "As long as we get pictures, that's what matters." That one sat weird with me. Not because pictures don't matter. They do. But she said it like the actual moment didn't. Like the memory could be replaced by an image, and that was basically the same thing. A week later, I came by my parents' house to drop off a list of the ceremony details, because my mom said printing it would help your father remember. She had one of those big plastic cups from Sonic on the counter with melted ice floating in red fruit punch. The TV was on too loud. Mason's gym bag was in the hallway, one shoe halfway under a chair like someone had kicked it off mid-argument. I was standing at the kitchen island going over the time, the parking lot, the ticket count, all of it. My dad wasn't even pretending to focus. He was half listening while opening junk mail. Then Mason walked in, leaned against the fridge, and said, "You know it's basically just a long walk, right?" I said, "That's what a graduation is, yes." He smirked. "Just checking." "Didn't know if they make you do a backflip for the diploma?" My mom laughed harder than the joke deserved. I smiled, but I felt that little sting. That tiny one. The one you ignore because calling it out makes you look sensitive. Then came sign number 2. 3 days before graduation, Mason got accepted into an electrical apprenticeship program he'd been waiting on. And look, good for him. Seriously. He'd bounced between jobs for 2 years, started things, quit things, blamed other people, blamed himself, said college wasn't for him, said trade school might be for him, then panicked and did nothing. So when he got that acceptance email, he was excited. And I was actually happy for him. I hugged him. I told him I was proud of him. I even reposted his little finally story on Instagram with clapping emojis because I really thought we could have one weekend where 2 siblings had good news and nobody made it weird. That same night, my mom started talking about doing something nice for Mason. I remember the exact way she said it, because that was the first moment my chest tightened. Something nice. As if my graduation was already booked and boring, but his thing was fresh and exciting. I said, "Yeah, we should celebrate him too. Maybe next weekend?" And my mom went, "Well, Sunday would be easiest because everyone's free." Sunday. My graduation day. I said, "My ceremony is Sunday." She looked at me like I was making it complicated. "I know," she said. "I mean, afterward." I asked what something nice meant. She said maybe dinner. I said I already made a dinner reservation for after my graduation. She blinked at me like she forgot. I'm not kidding. I had told her twice already. Actually, 3 times. I had made a reservation at this Italian place downtown because they had these giant windows, and I wanted one nice dinner where my family didn't act like sitting together was a hostage situation. I had already paid a deposit because it was graduation weekend and everywhere decent was booked. I even ordered these cheap little folded name cards off Etsy because I thought it would be cute. I know that sounds cheesy. I don't care. It mattered to me. My mom said, "Oh, right. That. That. Not your graduation dinner. That." Then she goes, "Well, maybe we combine it." And that right there should have told me everything, because somehow my graduation dinner immediately became a flexible thing, while Mason's celebration was treated like the moon landing. I said I didn't really want a combined dinner. I wasn't rude about it. I just said this was my graduation, and we could celebrate Mason literally any other night that week. My dad finally looked up and said, "It's one family dinner, Em. Doesn't have to be separate." And there it was. That word. Separate. As if wanting my own graduation dinner was selfish. As if I was demanding a parade down Main Street. I told myself they'd calm down. I told myself everyone was stressed. I told myself I was reading too much into tone, into wording, into weird little pauses. That's what I always did. That's how you survive in a family where the truth sounds meaner than the lie. The day before graduation, my mom asked me to come over so she could help steam my dress. I wore this simple white dress under my gown. Nothing fancy, just clean, fitted, and a little more grown up than the stuff I usually wore. I had bought it on sale and still kept the receipt in case I chickened out. My mom steamed the bottom half while standing too close to the kitchen window because she said the light was better there. She kept checking her phone, every few minutes, not hiding it either. I asked what was up. She said, "Just family stuff." That was sign number 3. Then my Aunt Carla texted in our family group chat asking what time to show up for my graduation dinner, and before I could answer, my mom said, "We may be shifting things around a little." Shifting things around, like we were talking about patio furniture. I wrote back, "My reservation is still at 7. No one replied for 10 full minutes. Then my dad wrote, "We'll figure it out tomorrow." I stared at that message so long my screen dimmed. Mason didn't say a word in the chat. That bothered me too. Not because I expected him to fix it, but because silence is still a choice. That night, I barely slept. Not because I thought they were going to skip it. I honestly still didn't think they'd go that far. I just had this gross little dread in my stomach. Like when you know a fight is coming, but you don't know what shape it's going to take. Graduation morning, I woke up at 5:48 without an alarm. My mouth was dry. My room smelled like hairspray and the vanilla candle I had blown out too late the night before. My gown was hanging on the closet door. My cap was on the desk next to the safety pins and a crumpled note where I'd written, "Don't cry before pictures." Jess, my best friend, had slept on the couch because she lived closer to campus than my parents and promised she'd help me get ready. She walked into my room half awake with one sock on, looked at me and said, "Today is your day. If anyone acts stupid, I will become a problem." That made me laugh. We got coffee on the way. I couldn't finish mine. My hands were shaking a little. I checked my phone every 4 minutes like it owed me something. At 8:12, my mom texted, "We're leaving in 20. Ceremony check-in was at 9:15. They lived 35 minutes away without traffic. I remember reading that text and feeling something cold move through me. I called her immediately. No answer. I texted back, "You need to leave now." She replied, "Your father is getting gas. Relax." Relax. That word should honestly be illegal. By 9:03, I was on campus with Jess, surrounded by families carrying flowers and balloons and giant stupid signs with baby pictures on them. One girl's whole family was wearing matching shirts with her face printed on them. I thought it was ridiculous until I saw how happy she looked, and then I almost cried over strangers. My mom texted at 9:11, running a few minutes behind. Dad texted at 9:26. Parking is a nightmare. Then nothing. The student line started moving. My department coordinator was smiling too hard and directing us like airport traffic. My phone buzzed again right before we went in. I looked down expecting, "We're here." Instead, it said, "Don't panic. We may miss the opening, but we'll be there." No period. That was my mom when she knew she was wrong. She stopped using punctuation like maybe that softened it. I stood there in my gown with my tassel slapping my cheek and felt that exact moment where denial starts slipping. Not fully, just enough. Inside the arena, they lined us up by major. Everyone was taking selfies. People were fixing each other's collars and borrowing lip gloss and laughing too loud because nerves make people loud. I kept turning around, checking the family entrance. Nothing. I sent my mom our section. Again. No reply. Then the ceremony started. Music, speeches, applause, all of it. I tried to stay present. I really did. I told myself maybe they were in the back. Maybe they got separated. Maybe they were sitting somewhere I couldn't see. Arenas are weird. Crowds are weird. Parking is real. Then, halfway through the dean's speech, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was from my cousin Haley. Not a text. An Instagram story notification. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in me already knew. I opened it. And there they were. All 3 of them. My mom in a pink blazer she had told me she was saving for graduation. My dad holding up a drink. Mason in the middle under a silver balloon arch that said, "Congrats, Mason." They were at Halcyon Steakhouse, smiling, not rushing, not stressed, not in traffic. Smiling like they had all day. I can still see the little details because that's how betrayal works. It freezes weird stuff. The condensation on my dad's glass. My mom's lipstick on her straw. Mason's hand doing that dumb peace sign he always did in pictures when he wanted to look like he wasn't trying. The caption on Haley's story was, "Proud of this guy." I literally stopped breathing for a second. Like, actually forgot. Jess was seated in the student guest area off to the side for overflow and later told me she could see my face change from across the floor. I didn't cry then. That would have been easier. I just went numb. A minute later, my mom finally texted me. "Your brother needed us this morning. We'll explain later. We'll celebrate you after." That was the point of no return. Not even because they missed it. Because they lied while I was standing there. They let me spend the morning hoping they were on the way while they were already at his celebration. They made me feel stupid in real time. And I had to walk. I had to stand when my row stood. I had to smile when the photographer gestured. I had to shake a stranger's hand. I had to hear my name called into a microphone and walk across a stage while my throat felt hot and my face felt frozen. The worst part is that the audience still cheered. Jess screamed my name. Her dad screamed too, even though he'd only met me like 4 times. Someone behind them yelled, "Let's go, Emily." And that almost broke me more than if nobody had cheered, because it was coming from people who didn't owe me anything. When I got my diploma cover, I looked toward the section where my family was supposed to be. 3 empty seats. Not metaphorically. Literally. I had saved them together and put the tickets in an envelope with my mom's name on it like an idiot. 3 empty seats in a row. Do you know how loud empty seats can feel? The ceremony ended around noon. People rushed the floor with flowers and cameras and those giant plastic leis. I stood there for a second while everybody else was running into arms. Jess got to me first. She hugged me so hard my cap shifted. I remember saying, "Don't say anything yet," because if she had, I would have lost it right there. She just said, "Okay." Then she handed me a tissue without making eye contact, which is one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. I called my mom. No answer. I called my dad. No answer. Mason answered on the 3rd ring. He sounded annoyed, like I was interrupting. I said, "Are you serious?" He paused and went, "Em, can we not do this right now?" That sentence still makes my blood pressure go up. Can we not do this right now? As if I was the one making a scene. I said, "You're at a restaurant, during my graduation." He sighed and said, "Mom thought it'd be easier if we did lunch first." Lunch first. That phrase. So casual, so planned. I said, "You let them skip my graduation for lunch?" And he said, "It's not just lunch. They wanted to celebrate me too." Two. That word was insulting all by itself because there had been no "to" for me at all. I hung up. Jess drove me to the Italian place where my graduation dinner reservation was supposed to be because I was still clinging to this dumb hope that maybe at least some relatives would meet me there, and I wouldn't have to go home and sit in my feelings in that gown. We got there at 12:47. I walked in still wearing my cap because I had forgotten it was on my head. The hostess looked at the book, then looked at me, then gave me this awkward, tight smile people use when they know something you don't. She said, "Oh, your mother called earlier. The reservation was canceled." I just stared at her. I said, "No, it wasn't." She turned the screen slightly. It was. Canceled at 11:14 a.m., while I was still in the ceremony. By Linda, my mother. Then the hostess, who had silver stars painted on her nails, said the sentence that made everything click into place. She said your family was moving the celebration to Halcyon. Moving the celebration. Not adding, Not combining. Moving. My graduation dinner had been canceled while I was getting my diploma, and my family had gone to Mason's restaurant instead. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your body just refuses to process humiliation like a normal person. Jess looked like she wanted to fight the hostess, which obviously wasn't the point, but I appreciated the energy. I walked out, sat on the curb in front of the restaurant, and finally cried. Not pretty crying either. Ugly, angry, can't catch your breath crying. My mascara was all over my fingers. People were walking past with gift bags and flower bouquets, and I felt so stupid in my white dress and heels, like I had shown up to the wrong life. Jess sat next to me for a while and didn't talk. Then she said very calmly, "You do not have to go to them." I said, "But they're my family." And she said, "Yeah, I know." That was it. No lecture. Just that. And somehow that hurt more because it sounded like the truth. Around 2 o'clock, my phone finally blew up. "Mom, where are you?" "Dad, everyone is asking." "Mom, come to Halcyon." "Dad, don't be dramatic." "Mason, seriously?" "Aunt Carla, honey, are you coming? Your mom said you were taking pictures." My mom had already started managing the narrative, instantly, before I had even decided what to do. I wrote one text in the family group. "You canceled my graduation dinner while I was still in the ceremony." Then I muted the chat. I should tell you something not flattering about myself here. I did not handle the next part in some graceful, mature, perfectly composed way. I didn't take the high road. I didn't breathe deeply. I didn't go home and journal. I let Jess drive me straight to Halcyon. Because I was furious. Because I wanted them to see my face. Because some part of me still thought if I walked into that room in my cap and gown, they'd realize how horrible this was and snap back into being my parents. That's the embarrassing part about being let down by people you love. Even after they do it, you still want them to fix it. Halcyon was one of those places with dark wood, low lights, and waiters who look like they know your credit score. I walked in wearing my graduation gown over my white dress, and everyone at the hostess stand looked at me like I was in the wrong building. I asked for the private room under Mason Reed. The hostess opened the door, and there they were. My family, some cousins, my aunt, my grandma, a cake with Mason's name on it, wrapped gifts, a little sign that said future electrician, my father standing to make some speech. My entrance cut through all of it like glass. Everything got quiet. My mom's face dropped first. Not guilty. Annoyed. That was the part I'll never forget. Annoyed. Like I had dragged something unpleasant into her nice lunch. I said, "You canceled my dinner?" No hello. No build-up. No performance. Just that. My dad pulled the whole not here voice. "Emily, sit down." I said, "No. Did you cancel my graduation dinner while I was graduating?" My mom stood up and smoothed her blazer like she was about to calm a stranger on an airplane. "Sweetheart, we were going to explain." I laughed again because apparently that was my body's coping mechanism that day. "Explain what? Why my graduation got moved under his name?" Mason went, Stop." I turned to him and said, "You stop." And yes, I said it louder than I needed to. My grandma looked stunned. Aunt Carla looked like she had been waiting years for the room to finally say what everyone knew. My dad said, "Your brother had important news too." And I said, "Then celebrate him tomorrow." My mom snapped back, "Not everything has to be about you." That right there, that one line, that was the real reveal. Not the restaurant, not the empty seats, not even the canceled reservation. That line. Because what kind of mother says not everything has to be about you to her daughter on her graduation day? A day that is, by definition, one of the few days in your life that is actually supposed to be about you. The room went dead quiet. I said, "This is literally my graduation." And my dad, in front of everyone, said, "It's a ceremony, Emily. You still got the degree." He meant it to sound practical, reasonable, adult, but all I heard was, the moment didn't matter because it belonged to me. My Aunt Carla said softly but clearly, "Linda, you canceled her reservation." My mom shot her a look and said, "We were trying to keep the family together." That's another classic line from people who only mean together when it's on their terms. I don't remember every word after that because adrenaline does weird things to memory, but I do remember one very small detail. There was a bread basket on the table, warm rolls, and one of them had my dad's thumbprint pressed into the top where he'd torn it open while I was talking. I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, he's hungry enough to eat through this. That was the exact second I stopped expecting remorse. I said, "Enjoy lunch." Then I turned around and left. My mom followed me into the hallway, heels clicking like angry punctuation. She grabbed my elbow and hissed, "You are embarrassing us." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "We messed up." "You are embarrassing us." I pulled my arm away and said, "No, you did that yourselves." And I walked out. Back at Jess's apartment, I peeled off my dress and sat on the bathroom floor in my slip for almost an hour because I couldn't calm down. My makeup was smeared. My scalp hurt from the pins. There was one fake eyelash half hanging off, and I was too tired to care. My phone kept buzzing. Mom called 6 times. Dad called twice. Mason once. Then my mom started leaving voicemails. The first one said, "I'm sorry your feelings are hurt." The second one said, "You don't understand how much pressure your brother has been under." The third one said, "Call me before you turn this into something it isn't." That last one told me everything, because in her mind, it still wasn't what they did. It was what I might say about it. The next morning, I went to my parents' house because I still had some boxes in my old room. I shouldn't have gone alone, but I did. The house smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. My mom was in the kitchen acting like she had already forgiven me. That was her move. Skip accountability, move straight into fake normal. She said, "There's quiche if you want some." I said, "I'm getting my stuff." My dad came in and leaned against the counter like we were about to discuss lawn care. Then came the conversation that should have happened the day before. I said, "Why did you lie to me?" Mom said, "Because if we told you we were adjusting plans, you would have overreacted." I said, "You mean I would have said no?" She crossed her arms. "You have to stop acting like your brother's success is some personal attack." That made me so angry I laughed again. I said, "You skipped my graduation." Dad cut in. He finally had something worth celebrating. That sentence landed like a slap. I said, "So did I." And Dad said, "You always do." I need you to hear how ugly that sounds in real life. Not because it was shouted, because it was calm. Like it was obvious. Like being reliable had permanently disqualified me from being cherished. I asked them point blank, "Would you have done this if it were Mason graduating?" Neither of them answered. That was my answer. Then Mason came downstairs. Sweatpants, phone in hand, hair still messy from sleep. He looked uncomfortable, which was the first decent emotion I'd seen from anyone in that house. I said, "Did you ask them to miss it?" He looked at my mom before he looked at me. And he said, "I didn't ask them to do anything." That's important because at the time I thought he was dodging. I didn't know yet how true that actually was. I said, "But you still sat there." He said, "What was I supposed to do?" I was so mad I said something I'm not proud of. I said, "Maybe act like a person for once." His face changed right away. And I wish I could tell you I took it back immediately, but I didn't. Because hurt people say ugly things when they want their pain to have somewhere to land. He muttered, "Whatever," and walked out. I packed 2 boxes, 3 trash bags, my old desk lamp, and the blanket my grandma made me when I was 12. My mom stood in the doorway of my room while I packed and said, "You really are going to ruin this family over one lunch." I said, No, you ruined it over one lunch. Then I left. For the next 2 weeks, I barely talked to any of them. I started my new job at a small marketing firm downtown, which sounds more glamorous than it was. Mostly I formatted decks, fixed typos other people missed, and answered emails that somehow all felt urgent and pointless at the same time. But I had a paycheck. I had a desk. I had something to do besides sit around replaying the same day in my head. Jess let me stay with her and her roommate until I figured out rent. Her apartment had terrible water pressure and one cabinet door that wouldn't close, but it felt peaceful in a way my parents' house never did. Nobody in that apartment expected me to be the easy one. Nobody called me dramatic for having a reaction to something dramatic. My parents, meanwhile, started the campaign. And yes, I call it a campaign because that's what it was. My mom texted things like, "We miss you." Then, "Your grandma is upset." Then, "Family doesn't throw each other away over misunderstandings." Dad sent, "Call your mother." Then, "You made your point." Then, "Enough." Not one message said, "We are sorry." Not one. Aunt Carla called me privately and asked what really happened, because apparently my mom was telling relatives that I stormed off after refusing to combine celebrations. Refusing to combine celebrations. See how language works? That makes it sound like there were two equal things on the table and I was the difficult one. I told my aunt the truth. All of it. She was quiet for a second, then said, "I had a feeling." That one hurt too, because it meant even other people saw the pattern before I was willing to. My grandma sent me a card in the mail with $50 and a note that said, "I'm proud of you, even if that day didn't look how it should have." I cried harder over that card than I did over any voicemail. About a month after graduation, Mason showed up at the coffee shop where I used to work. I wasn't on shift. I was just there meeting Jess. He texted, "Outside." I almost didn't go, but I did. He was leaning against his car, holding 2 iced coffees like we were normal siblings meeting up on purpose. He handed me one and said, "It's oat milk. Don't make it weird." That was such a Mason opening line that I almost smiled. We sat at one of the metal tables outside. It was hot. My drink was sweating through the napkin. There was a little kid inside crying over a cake pop. For a second, it almost felt ordinary. Then he said, "I'm not here to fight." I said, "Okay." He rubbed the back of his neck and looked out at the street instead of at me. Then he dropped the twist that changed everything. He said, "I told Mom and Dad to go to your graduation." I blinked. I said, "What?" He nodded once. "I told them the dinner didn't have to start early." And just like that, the whole story they had built around him needing them started cracking. He kept talking. Apparently, the original plan for his celebration had been dinner at 6:30, after my ceremony, after my reservation, after everything. He said he had literally told my mom on Friday, "Just go to Emily's thing first." And my mom had said the private room at Halcyon was only available for lunch, and the photographer her friend recommended could only come before 2 o'clock. And Emily will understand because she always does. I just stared at him. He looked ashamed, which on Mason looked almost like anger because he didn't wear guilt very well. I said, "So you knew?" He said, "Not all of it." I asked what that meant. He said he thought they'd still show up for at least part of my ceremony and then come late to his lunch. He claimed he didn't know my dinner had been canceled until I walked into Halcyon in my gown. I said, "And then what? You just stayed seated?" He winced. Yeah. At least he didn't lie. I asked why. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because for once they were all in on me." That answer made me angry and sad at the same time. Because it was honest. And because I understood it. Not approved of it. Understood it. He'd spent years being the family screw-up. I'd spent years being the family insurance policy. For one afternoon, he got the version of them I had always wanted. And he was too selfish to give it up. That doesn't make him innocent, but it made him real. Then he told me the part that made my stomach turn. The cake, the private room deposit, and some of the decorations had been paid for using the money relatives had sent ahead for Emily's graduation dinner. My aunt had sent a check. Grandma had put cash in an envelope. My mom had deposited it and used part of it on Halcyon because, in Mason's words, Mom said it all counts as family celebrating. I actually felt cold hearing that, because that meant they hadn't just skipped me. They had used my milestone to fund his spotlight. I asked Mason if he was serious. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of a text from my mom sent 2 days before graduation. It said, "Don't mention the gift money to Emily. It'll only upset her, and this weekend is supposed to be positive." I can still see that message in my head. No apology, no hesitation, just strategy. I asked him why he was telling me now. He said, "Because they're still acting like you're crazy and it's getting old." I said, "That's why? Not because it was wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "Both." I should tell you I didn't hug him. I didn't forgive him in that moment. I also didn't throw the coffee in his face, which honestly shows growth. I just said, "Send me that screenshot." He did. Then he got in his car and left. I sat there staring at my phone until Jess came out and asked what happened. When I showed her the screenshot, she said, "Oh, they are done." I wish that had been true right then. But families like mine don't explode all at once. They leak, slowly. Ugly truth comes out in drips. I confronted my parents that same night. I went to their house again, which, yes, maybe was dumb, but I was done sitting with it. My mom opened the door in pajama pants and said, "You should have called first." I held up my phone and said, "You used my graduation money for Mason's lunch." She didn't even deny it immediately. That's how sure she was that she could talk her way out of anything. She said, "It wasn't lunch. It was a celebration for the family." I said, "You told him not to tell me." Dad walked in from the den and saw my face and instantly got defensive. He went, "Why are you here?" I said, "Because I want you to say it to me." Mom finally changed her tone. Not sorry. Sharp. "Fine. Yes, we used some of the money. We were going to replace it." I said, "When?" She said, "When things settled down." Things. Always vague things. I asked, "Why did you lie and make it sound like Mason needed you?" My dad answered this one. He said, "Because your brother finally had confidence, and we weren't going to let you ruin that." That sentence did something to me. Not explosive, not dramatic. It just shut a door. Quietly. Completely. I said, "I'm not the one who ruined anything." Mom said, "You have always been so competitive with him." Competitive. I laughed in her face. I said, "I was asking you to come to my graduation. That's not competition. That's being your daughter." Then came a short little exchange that I think about all the time because it was so simple and so ugly. I said, "Did you ever once think about how that would feel?" My mom said, "We thought you'd understand." I said, "Why?" And my dad said, "Because you're stronger." People love using your strength as permission to hurt you. That's what I finally understood. They weren't proud that I could handle things. They depended on it. Because it let them neglect me without having to call it neglect. I left again. That was the last time I went into that house without needing a reason. The next few months were messy. I got my own tiny apartment with thin walls and one window that looked directly at a brick wall, but it was mine. I bought mismatched plates at Target. I lived on pasta, eggs, and frozen dumplings. I learned how quiet a place can feel when nobody is waiting to dump their stress on you. My mom kept texting on holidays and birthdays and random Tuesdays like nothing had happened. "Thinking of you. Love you. Your cousin is asking if you're coming Sunday. Can we please move forward?" Move forward is another phrase that usually means skip the part where I admit what I did. Dad switched strategies and started being practical. He sent a Zelle payment for part of the dinner deposit with the note, "Happy now." I sent it back. Not because I didn't need money. I absolutely did. My rent was due. My student loans were looming. I was one car repair away from a problem. But because that payment wasn't accountability, it was hush money with bad grammar. Mason texted a few times, mostly dumb stuff. A meme, a picture of a raccoon in his trash can. A message that said, "Mom is doing that thing where she acts like she's the victim." I never knew what to do with his texts. Part of me still loved him. Part of me wanted to block him. Part of me knew he was the easiest person to blame because he was standing in the spotlight that day, but the truth was uglier than that. The truth was, my parents built this system, and we both learned how to survive inside it in different ways. Around month 3, my mom escalated. She started posting more on Facebook. That's when I really understood how badly she needed the appearance of being a good mother. She posted old pictures of me from childhood with captions like, "No matter how old they get, they'll always be your babies." Then pictures of Mason at his apprenticeship with proud mom moments. Then generic quotes about family healing and grace and forgiveness that somehow always appeared right after she texted me something manipulative. People in the comments would write things like, "You are such a loving mama." And I'd just stare at my phone. Because internet parents and real-life parents are not always the same person. One night, around month 4, Aunt Carla called again. She said my mom was telling people I'd become cold since graduation and that I was punishing the family because I didn't like Mason getting attention. I said, "Did she tell you they used my gift money for his party?" My aunt went quiet. Then she said very slowly, "No, she did not." That's when I realized something else. The lie wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. My parents needed the story to be, Emily is difficult. Emily is dramatic. Emily is jealous. Emily is ungrateful. Because if that story didn't hold, then people would have to look directly at what they did. And some of those people had helped pay for it without knowing. Aunt Carla asked if I had proof. I said, "A screenshot from Mason." She said, "Keep it." That felt ominous at the time. Turns out she was right. By month 5, my parents started pushing harder because the holidays were coming, and apparently I was supposed to clock back into my role as the agreeable daughter who smooths over tension so everyone else can eat ham in peace. Mom said Grandma's blood pressure was not good, and stress wasn't helping. Dad said, "Show up for Thanksgiving and be done with this." Mason texted, "Honestly, if you don't come, they're gonna make it weird all day." Which was maybe the most accidentally honest thing he ever said. I didn't go to Thanksgiving. I spent it at Jess's boyfriend's sister's house, which sounds random because it was random. There were 6 people there and 3 dogs, and someone burned the rolls and nobody cared. At one point, an uncle I had never met before asked if I wanted dark meat or white meat and almost started crying because he asked like my answer mattered. That's what healing is sometimes. Not a grand speech. Not closure. Just being around people who don't make you beg for basic consideration. Then came month 6, and this is where the photo comes in. 2 weeks before Christmas, my mother posted one of those family collage things on Facebook. You know the kind. Too many pictures, soft lighting, quotes in cursive. The caption said, "Family means showing up even when life gets busy. So proud of my kids and the bond we share." I read that line 3 times. Family means showing up. Showing up. After everything, she wrote "showing up," and the comments started instantly. "So beautiful. You did an amazing job with your children. Love a strong family." Then my Aunt Carla commented a heart. My grandma commented, "Love you all." And something in me snapped. Not in a wild way. In a clear way. Like a fog lifting. Because I suddenly understood that if I stayed quiet forever, they got to keep my silence as part of the lie. They got to skip my graduation, spend my money, call me dramatic, and still be publicly praised as the parents who always show up. and I was done helping them with that. Now, before anybody decides I'm some flawless revenge queen, let me be honest. I didn't instantly make some strategic master plan. I sat on my couch in old sweatpants with cold takeout noodles next to me and stared at that post for 20 minutes while my heater clicked like it might die. Then I opened my camera roll. And there it was. The photo. I had taken it that morning before the ceremony started. A quick front camera selfie to check my lipstick and cap. I almost deleted it weeks earlier because it made me sick to look at. But in the background, behind my shoulder, were the 3 seats I had saved for them. Still empty. The printed cards were visible. Mom, Dad, Mason, all 3. And at the top of the arena screen in the distance, you could see the timestamp from the pre-ceremony slide. That mattered because it showed it was before names were called. Before any excuse. Before any, we were just late. There was also something else in that photo I hadn't really noticed before. My face. I looked excited. Nervous, yeah. But hopeful. That somehow made it worse. Or maybe better, for proof. Because you could see I had no idea yet. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't write a rant. I didn't say, actually. I commented that one photo under her post. Just the photo. Nothing else. Then I locked my phone and threw it face down on the couch like it might explode. And for a few minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone started vibrating so hard it actually shifted on the cushion. My mom called first. Then Dad. Then Mason. Then my aunt. Then a cousin. Then a number I didn't know. I ignored every single one. I opened Facebook again maybe 10 minutes later. The comments had changed. People were asking questions. Wait, what is this? Were you not there? What happened? Then Aunt Carla replied under my photo. This was the same day Linda moved Emily's graduation dinner to Mason's lunch without telling her. Then Haley, my cousin, who I honestly did not expect to go public with anything, replied with a screenshot from her old story archive of the halcyon lunch with the timestamp still on it. Which meant now there were 2 receipts sitting under my mother's big family means showing up post. One showing my empty reserved seats. One showing them at Mason's celebration during my graduation. That one photo I posted cracked open the whole thing. The reason it blew up wasn't because it was cruel. It was because it was simple. Simple proof is hard to argue with. There wasn't a long explanation for my mom to twist. There wasn't some emotional essay she could call dramatic. It was just an image. Empty seats with their names on them. That night was chaos. My mom left me a voicemail crying, but not the real kind. The outraged crying. The, "How could you do this to me publicly?" kind. Dad texted, "Take it down now." Then, "This is between family." Then, "You are humiliating your mother." Mason texted, "Jesus Christ." Then a minute later, fair. That actually made me laugh for the first time in days. My grandma called, and I almost didn't answer because I didn't know where she stood. But I did. She was quiet for a long time after I said hello. Then she asked one question. "Did they really use the money I sent for your dinner?" I said, "Yes." And she just went, "I see." That's all. But my grandma's "I see" was never small. It meant the file had been opened. Apparently, she called my mother right after that, because the next morning my mom sent me 6 texts in a row. "Why would you tell Grandma that? You know she doesn't need stress. You are doing this to hurt us." And my favorite, "You could have spoken to me privately." I just stared at that one. Because privately is where truth goes to get buried in my family. Privately is where they told me to relax. Privately is where they said I was stronger. Privately is where they lied and expected me to protect them from the consequences. So, no, I wasn't interested in privately. Over the next week, everything they cared about started wobbling. And no, they didn't lose their house. They didn't go broke. They weren't ruined in some movie villain way. What they lost was the version of themselves they had been selling to everyone. My Aunt Carla stopped speaking to my mom for a while because she had written one of the checks that got used for Mason's lunch. Grandma told my parents she would not be funding disrespect anymore, which mattered because my dad had been quietly counting on her help for some home repairs. Two of my mom's church friends stopped calling her Mama of the Year online because now the comments under that post were a mess. Relatives who had been hinting that I should forgive and forget suddenly got very quiet. Because once people saw the photo, and then the lunch screenshot, and then started comparing the times, it became impossible to sell me as the unstable one. Even better, my mom tried to delete the post, but by then, too many people had screenshotted it. That's the thing about trying to perform family online. If the performance breaks, it breaks in public. My dad showed up at my apartment 3 days later. I almost didn't buzz him in, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. He stood in my doorway holding his truck keys like he was trying not to slam them into his palm. He looked older, tired. And for one dumb second, I hoped maybe this was it. Maybe this was the apology. It wasn't. He said, "You made your point." I said, "Did I?" He looked past me into my apartment like he didn't respect the fact that it was my space. Then he said, "Your mother is devastated." I said, "Was she devastated when she canceled my dinner?" He clenched his jaw. Then he said the line that finally ended whatever was left of my patience. "She thought you'd get over it faster. Not, we were wrong, not we hurt you. She thought you'd get over it faster." Like the issue was the length of my pain. I said, "That sounds like her problem." He actually flinched at that. Then he went with the classic parent move when guilt fails. Anger. "You embarrassed this family for strangers online." I said, "No, I showed them one true thing." He said, "You could have called." I said, "I did, on graduation day." That shut him up. Finally. For a few seconds, we just stood there. Then I said, "You keep acting like the photo is what hurt you. It wasn't. The photo just showed people what you did." He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but there was nowhere for him to go. Because it was true. He left without another word. That was the last real conversation we had for months. Mason and I had one more weird talk after that. He came by with a box of my old stuff my mom had found in the attic, which was obviously just an excuse. Inside were yearbooks, a hoodie, some books, and the little folded name cards from the dinner that never happened. She had saved them. I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it did. Seeing those cards again made me feel sick. He stood in my kitchen and said, "Mom says you wanted to destroy the family." I said, "Do you think that?" He shrugged in that irritating way he does when he's uncomfortable. Then he said, "I think you wanted them to stop lying." And I said, "That's not the same thing." He nodded. Then he said something I still think about. "I didn't know they did all that because they thought you'd stay." I said, "Stay what?" He looked at me for a second and said, "The one who gets it." That hit hard because it was exactly right. They had trained me into understanding, into flexibility, into swallowing hurt fast enough to keep their lives convenient. I asked him if he regretted that day. He said, "Yeah." Then I asked, "Would you have regretted it if I never posted the photo?" He took too long to answer. That was answer enough. So, no, we didn't suddenly become close after that. Some viewers are probably going to hate that. They want the brother redemption arc. Real life doesn't always do arcs on schedule. Sometimes people are halfway sorry and still selfish. Sometimes they tell the truth only when it also helps them. That doesn't make them monsters. It doesn't make them safe either. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Jess and her family and learned her mother put cinnamon in the whipped cream, which I had never heard of and now kind of love. My parents mailed me a gift card and a note that said, "Our door is always open." I did not respond. The weirdest part about all this is that once I stopped trying to make them see me, my life got quieter. Better even. I got a raise at work. I bought my own couch secondhand from a couple in Dublin who were moving and insisted on giving me a throw blanket for free. I started sleeping through the night. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. I realized how much energy I had spent trying to earn softness from people who had decided my strength made softness unnecessary. And yeah, I also had ugly moments. I still scrolled their pages sometimes. I still got jealous seeing my mom post proud stuff about Mason's apprenticeship. I still rehearsed fake arguments in the shower. I still imagined what I should have said in the restaurant hallway. I still felt guilty on random Tuesdays because that training runs deep. But guilt isn't always proof you did something wrong. Sometimes it's just proof you broke a role people benefited from. A few weeks ago, my aunt told me my mom still says I weaponized a photo. And maybe some of you watching think I did. Maybe you think I should have texted it privately. Maybe you think public embarrassment is too far. Maybe you think no matter what parents do, you handle it behind closed doors. I get that argument. I really do. But here's the problem. Behind closed doors is where they were strongest. Behind closed doors, they minimized. Behind closed doors, they rewrote. Behind closed doors, I was always the dramatic one, the difficult one, the daughter who took things personally. The photo took that power away. It didn't add anything. It didn't distort anything. It didn't need a narrator. It was just the truth standing there in rows 14 through 16 with little folded cards and nobody in the seats. And the reason that truth hit so hard is because they knew exactly what it meant. That I had expected them. That I had prepared for them. That I had still believed, right up until the ceremony started, that my parents would show up for me. There's something humiliating about admitting that you kept expecting better from people who had already trained you not to. That might be the hardest part of this whole story. Not the lunch. Not the post. Not even the voicemails. It's admitting how long I helped them do it. How many signs I swallowed. How many jokes I let slide. How many times I translated neglect into, they're just stressed. I even think about that one cruel thing I said to Mason. Maybe act like a person for once. I wish I hadn't said that. I do. Because even though he benefited from what happened, he was also shaped by the same house, the same rules, the same messed up system where one kid gets built into the family project and the other gets turned into the family sponge. That doesn't excuse him. But it matters. It matters because messy people make these stories real. If Mason had been 100% evil, this would be easier. If my mom had been cold all the time, easier. If my dad had screamed and thrown stuff, easier. But they weren't easy. My mom could be warm when it cost her nothing. My dad could be generous when the spotlight was on him for it. Mason could be sweet and selfish in the same hour. And me? I could be patient to the point of self-betrayal, then suddenly vicious when I finally snapped. That's family sometimes. Not simple, just damaging. A lot of people ask me if I'll ever forgive them. Honestly, I don't know. Forgiveness is not the question I care about anymore. The question is trust. And trust is harder. Because forgiveness can happen in your own head. Trust requires evidence, changed behavior, consistency, truth without dragging it out of someone. And I haven't seen any of that. What I've seen is my mother being more upset that people know than that I was hurt. What I've seen is my father still acting like efficiency is morality. What I've seen is a family system that only works if I keep absorbing the cost. I'm not doing that anymore. The last thing my mom said to me on the phone, the last real thing, was, "I hope one day you understand that parents are human." And I remember sitting on my couch holding the phone away from my ear and thinking, yes, that's exactly the problem. I do understand that. I understand that parents get tired, make mistakes, panic, favor one kid without admitting it, protect the child they think needs more, lean on the child they think can take it. I understand all of that. What I don't accept is being asked to carry the consequences of their humanity while they keep the comfort of pretending they did nothing wrong. That's different. A mistake is missing the moment. A choice is canceling my dinner during the ceremony. A choice is using my gift money. A choice is lying afterward. A choice is calling me dramatic. A choice is posting, family means showing up like the internet wouldn't remember. That's why the photo mattered. Because it froze one choice they could never talk around again. Sometimes I still look at that picture. Not because I enjoy it, because it reminds me of the exact version of me they lost. The girl in that photo still believed showing up for everyone meant someone would eventually show up for her. She looked excited, hopeful, a little nervous, a little proud. She had no idea she was about to learn one of the worst lessons of her life in a packed arena full of strangers. And maybe that sounds dramatic. Maybe it is. But family betrayal is dramatic, even when nobody throws a chair. Sometimes it's just a missed ceremony and a lunch reservation and a line you can't uncross after that. If you're wondering whether I regret posting the photo, the honest answer is no. I regret needing to. I regret that one image did more to make them tell the truth than 6 months of conversations ever could. I regret that my graduation memory will always come with the smell of arena popcorn and the glow of my cousin's Instagram story and the sight of 3 empty seats. But I don't regret the photo, because silence was making me disappear inside their version of events. And I was tired of disappearing. So that's what happened. My parents skipped my graduation to celebrate my brother. They lied. They used my money. They called me jealous. And 6 months later, I sent one photo that took away the story they were hiding behind. Some people think that was cruel. Some people think it was overdue. I still think about both sides, if I'm being honest.